freeze. We tried taking our dry ice and blending it up into a powder to turn soda already with a bunch of CO2. I wonder how much this could keep freezing. We got a whole bottle of soda and it's, you know, sort of freezing with a pebbled texture to it. It's not going evenly everywhere. It just seems a lot way faster. In fact, it's frozen pretty much all of the. That's about the size. Ooh. If I dig down, I can pull a couple of them out. Let's take a gamble here. Slushy consistency. If you use large chunks, it may take a few minutes of stirring, but you'll get there. In the video, I said I might want to try it again using dry ice because the liquid nitrogen pulled all about the size I want. Well defined. You can't see the individual particles that much. And an amazing job of freezing the soda very quickly as well. Cool everything down and add a little bit of carbonation, hopefully. All right, we've got some liquid nitrogen in our bowl. Let's so much faster. Like I said, it took 5 or 6 minutes with the chunks of dry ice. You scoop it out into your cup. Then finally, we tried freezing our dry ice even more in liquid nitrogen. Get these chunks in there. We'll just kind of stir it up and see if we can get dry ice would put carbonation back. It's not a complete powder, but there is a lot of powder in there. Freeze on here. Let's try and scoop it from the bowl into our cup. Where's my spoon? How long this should take. And it froze way faster. It went from 5 or 6 minutes of stirring to about, it's not this in there. To see what few things. Dry ice slushy out of a bottle of soda, but it can take a while if you want to do it the safe method, which is to leave. I was curious if quantity of dry ice, but then we're going to throw it in a blender. And ice still hurt a little bit, but it broke up. Wow, that is definitely freezing way. In fact, we were able to freeze 2 entire bottles full of our. I'm going to keep going until it doesn't freeze it anymore, or until I run out of bottles of soda. Difference to our cup. We don't want to eat those. Just want them to. And changing the surface area makes a huge job. Not too long ago, we showed you how to use liquid nitrogen while to freeze. You'll get a nice mixed up slushy consistency. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have much fizzy. We've got our soda, we've got our dry ice. Let's get started. To start, just top this off. Good. In liquid nitrogen, it becomes extremely and just not hold any fizz left. Well, there is another variety. See if we get a different texture, a different freeze time, and if it took 5 or 6 minutes of stirring, which is one of the concerns I had with this. Difference that made when we mixed it into our soda. There we go. That's our orange and lime, or sorry, I want to see. Two left over in it. And then of course we don't want to eat the dry ice. Dump in our blended up CO2 and stir it and see if we can get our soda to start freezing. Let's pour a measure of our soda, taking some dry ice. Our blender actually seals up. Just got a little bit left in this bottle. Sizing off of it because I don't want any. That powdered most of it, and we've got our little mandarin lime. That might have actually happened. That was too cold. Well, it froze all of it, no problem. I think we're gonna add more from a different bottle and see if we can get it. Our considered dry ice. Nothing. Super frozen dry ice. That's so weird. This is the same amount of dry ice for the most part. Enough of the carbon dioxide coming off of the dry ice, airtight when it's closed. So to keep the CO2 pressure from building up inside, we're gonna drill a small frozen. All right, I've got a spoonful. Oh, as what went into our mandarin and lime flavored sodas mixed together, frozen, and it's not that freeze time than the normal powdered dry ice. Some dry ice left over. So overall, the dry ice can turn it into a very fine powder. We'll see what happens if we mix that powder in with our soda. Oh, that had it to start freezing into a slush. Ha! That just falls right to pieces now. I don't know. Once it starts to absorb the carbon dioxide, once it's gotten down to the temperature where it's cold enough to actually begin to in my mouth, freezing onto my tongue. That sounds uncomfortable. Let's try this. Still surprisingly little in terms of fizz. Got a little bit of fizz to it. There you go, making slushies. Man, that does come apart really easily. Ice can freeze soda into a slush soda, and we don't want to be putting the chunks of dry ice in our mouth, so you have to be really careful of it. React with the rest of the dry ice. But there are a couple other things I still want to try to see if slushy at this point. I think we've maybe even gone past the texture of slushy and into, and of course we want to avoid scooping any chunks when we eat this. All right, I think that's a pretty good, there we go, a homemade slurp first batch with the larger chunks of dry ice, and it took and there is still chunks of dry ice in there. Very fizzy. There might be a little bit carbon dioxide to it. Well, I would say an even faster gas than the dry ice, just constantly stirring. With the powdered stuff, it just immediately. I think maybe carbon dioxide doesn't dissolve well into liquid when it's this cold. For this experiment today, and remember to come gear yourself up with products and merch at thekingofrandom.com. Bigger. Kind of has been dissolved into the slushy, carbon dioxide added into it. See you there. This is still so cold. I'm just gonna pour more soda on top of it. And I'm not sure what's causing the difference. Turning into a good slushy though. The question is whether we don't want to do that. Wow, that froze it soda and it's still turned into slush and it's more or less carbonated than our first one. Nitrogen to really bring the temperature down because that also makes it more fragile. So we took our compared to just a bottle of soda, this seems like it has so much volume. Soda into a delicious Slurpee. At the end of that, off some soda and then add our powdered All right, let's take our soda back into the soda as it froze it. Jet of carbon dioxide gas flying out here in the hole. All right, let's pour. Soda contains the little bits of dry ice that have soda, but it is almost powdery. It's using soda and dry ice. We tried a few different varieties and we learned if freezing, it might squeeze all of the carbon dioxide out of it. Dry ice in it. I don't really have a good sense for how freezing it in liquid nitrogen, then breaking it apart into a dust, ending up, I would say, and overall, it works pretty well. It's a good texture, tastes really good. I don't think there's much dry ice in this bit. A hole into the side of the cup. This would just go in your mouth if you started to eat it. I've never tried just chunks of dry ice and soda before to see how long it takes to solidify. 10 seconds of stirring, it was already frozen. But we also still had little chunks of dry ice sort of mix this. I'm trying to make sure there's no vapor rush. Really brittle to the point where we can just sort of break it apart. So I want to try it. Well, today we're going to try a few different varieties of that and we'll see if we can get a Slurpee that's still nice and of dry ice and then using that to freeze. Almost started freezing together. There's a lot more surface there. Lid on and then shake it up. More frozen and turned back into that give us a little bit more to freeze some of that to fizz. For our next test, we're going to take a similar in the way of carbonation. In fact, none of our experiments really gave us a carbonated slushy for them. In the end, it still wasn't nearly as frozen as this is. So grinding it up, I'm not even going to blend this. I'm just going to put some larger chunks that can easily be picked out once your slushy has formed. Thanks for joining us in with our frozen. All right, here we go. We've got our dry ice chunks. Definitely has enough freezing power to make a super cool dry ice. Broke that down into tiny little chunks and powder and mixed that in with the soda. That did a comparison. Normal variety we want to try. We've still got some dry ice. And as we've seen in the past, if we freeze our dry ice. Hey guys, I'm Nate. Welcome back to the workshop. That goes so quickly. Ooh, we're getting somewhere. Getting some slush in there. As it's mixing up and freezing to really give us a carbonated fizzy result. Put it into our bowl, then break up some medium-sized chunks of our dry ice, put that in, add a chunk of dry ice to it, and let it really get cold. in case dry ice isn't cold enough. Full sort of picking around the dry ice as all of the carbonation out of our soda and out of our soda. Let's give it a shot. Just that much soda, and that was about half of one of these bottles, and it's got so much air and for the most part. So something about soda seems to not really absorb. I don't know, it's kind of like the fruit flavored Dippin' Dots almost. It's not quite that. It's interesting how you can see the vapors that are still forming. This method is that we're putting powdered dry ice into the soda. All right, let's see how soft this stuff is.
Hi! Hi! Yay! Oh! One more time! Yay! Oh! Let it go! Yay! Oh! Ha! Oh, wow! Oh.